One of the key developments in German cinema since reunification has been the emergence of the so-called Berlin School, a loose collection of filmmakers who take the view that the most interesting stories to be told don't necessarily lie in Germany's dark totalitarian past. They have forged a new kind of German cinema, one that deals with more personal stories as opposed to big historical events. And they've met with considerable success on the international film festival circuit. BBC Culture's Matthew Anderson reports.
The fall of the Berlin Wall triggered a crisis of German identity. The old certainties of East and West were swept aside, but what would come in their place? It was from this atmosphere that the films of the Berlin School emerged. In the 1990s, the films of three young filmmakers, Christian Petzold, Thomas Aslan and Angela Schanelek, all graduates of Berlin's German Film and Television School, showed some common characteristics.
The films just went with their characters into their daily lives. So it was a reality how you can find it in the kitchen, in the sitting room, on the streets. But there's one thing which you can say which all have in common, and that is that they are more observing.
Berlin School films are quiet, subtle. There isn't much dialogue. And their characters often seem to be waiting for something, lost and adrift, alienated by their surroundings. Before the advent of the Berlin School, the last big movement in German filmmaking was the so-called New German Cinema of the late 1960s and 1970s that included filmmakers such as Wim Wenders, Rainer Werner Fassbinder and Werner Herzog. This movement launched itself bullishly into the world with a manifesto that proclaimed, "The old film is dead, we believe in the new." The Berlin School, by contrast, has always been a much looser association. The name comes not from the filmmakers themselves, but from critics.
We never declared what we want, because each and every one of us wants something else, you know. and so there's no manifesto or declaration or anything. The only thing that happened was that there suddenly in mid-90s there were a couple of films that had some similarities, and so critics were searching for a name for it, and Berlin School was the label that stuck.
Das war ein Befehl!
There are, however, some definite tendencies, such as a reluctance to deal with the past. Many of the most popular films of the past 15 years have dramatized difficult moments in Germany's history. Films such as Downfall, about Hitler's last days, or The Lives of Others, which dealt with the intrusive surveillance techniques of the Stasi. But the films of the Berlin School have avoided these subjects.
I think that if you construct a story around a big historical event, that it can only lead to a naive message at the end of the movie. So I think it's much more interesting to focus on to an intimate story about two people, a relationship.
Their movies focused on characters struggling to adapt in changing times, in the here and now. Christoph Hochhäusler's film This Very Moment from 2003 features a harried stepmother who, at her wit's end with her stepchildren's bickering and goading of her, abandons them in a moment of anger. Her motivation for this callous action is never clear.
You can't penetrate a person. You can't know what he or she is thinking. I mean, the whole grammar of film language is about understanding the character, and you give them tics and traits. These tools, in my mind, have become overused, you know.
The Berlin School may be a label imposed upon filmmakers by critics, but it's been a useful one for them. As a group, they've attracted a lot more recognition than they ever would have on their own. They've given us a window into contemporary Germany, but rather than guiding us to a particular view, they leave us to make up our own minds. These are difficult films. They leave a lot to the viewer, but they can be richly rewarding.
If you want to experience Germany, what is going on, what the people are thinking, I think Berlin School are a perfect example.
Of course, Germany's past is inescapable, and one Berlin School filmmaker, Christian Petzold, recently turned his attention to World War II and its aftermath. It's a subject that makes many German filmmakers somewhat uncomfortable. Christian Petzold's film Phoenix was first unveiled at the Toronto Film Festival, where it made quite an impact, and it was released here in Germany last month. BBC Culture's Christian Blauvelt reports.
Passport.
Set right after the fall of the Third Reich, Phoenix tells the story of a Jewish woman, played by Nina Haas, who survives imprisonment in the concentration camp, but emerges disfigured. Looking only somewhat like her former self, she searches Berlin for her husband, who may have betrayed her to the Nazis.
The Nazis destroyed not only art, music, films, they destroyed culture and also the love. And Phoenix is about a similar situation, a destroyed love and a woman who tried to reconstruct herself and reconstruct her love and her feelings, which the Nazis had destroyed.
Die wollten dich umbringen, weil du eine Jüdin bist. Ich suche Johnny.
It's always a metaphor for a bigger picture, you know. I don't know that many movies that talk about that period of time, right after the war.
Das ist Frau Dr. Wolf. Sie arbeitet ab heute hier bei uns in der Kinderchirurgie. Sie kommt aus Berlin.
Christian Petzold might be dealing with major historical events, but in keeping with the style of the Berlin School, the story is told through the lives of ordinary people. I sought out Eric Jarosinski, the publisher of Nine Quarterly and a German culture expert, to assess Petzold's career. How does Christian Petzold fit into the German filmmaking landscape of the last 25 years?
Well, I think he's been really significant in that he's been willing to take this tension between realism, fantasy, subjectivity, objectivity, and apply it to lots of different subjects. When you're dealing with something like World War II, the Nazi period, and so on, that's a subject that any German filmmaker knows he or she is going to be stepping into a number of potential problems, but also great opportunities in terms of making a film that really resonates with people, is dealing with subject matter that is still really current today.
With a few exceptions, like Rainer Werner Fassbinder in the 1970s, German directors of the post-war period shied away from directly confronting the war. But in the past decade, that has begun to change.
Wir können Geld verdienen, viel Geld.
You can talk about it now, that for sure, that I embrace that very much, that it's possible, you know, to say, to have a conversation about it. I agree that you can't run around with the guilt on your shoulders for lots of generations, but it's not that far away, and it can always happen again. So no matter where.
Weihnachten in Berlin.
Weihnachten in Berlin.
Weihnachten in Berlin.
Those few German screen endeavors which have addressed World War II have hardly elicited a neutral response, including a hugely popular recent German TV miniseries, Generation War, also released as a film. It was accused of sanitizing aspects of the war. If Petzold's film hasn't incurred this criticism, it may be due to one particular reason.
What I love is that he never gives answers, he raises questions.
Lene, ich weiß, dass sie liebt.
Over the past 25 years, filmmakers here in Berlin have been affected by the drama of the wall coming down and subsequent reunification of Germany. But that was a long time ago, November 1989. What about young Berliner filmmakers today? Are they still excited at the prospect of exploring Germany's divided past? Or have they moved on?
And action.
On location in Berlin, director Niels Kervin is shooting a sequence for a fundraising trailer for an espionage series. The director thinks Germany's divided past is still inevitably on the minds of many filmmakers here.
It's inside the people. They live with it. They experienced it, and when it comes up, it comes up.
Wem soll ich vertrauen?
And to filmmakers born in the East, including the director of this year's drama called West, set in Berlin, divided Germany is still a live emotional issue. The filmmaker's father was jailed for trying to escape to the West.
The memories of autumn '89 in Berlin are still so strong for me, stronger than anything else, or stronger than many other things I experienced later in my life. So I guess that's why I keep on telling these stories.
Berlin is very cosmopolitan. Many of today's filmmakers weren't born in the city, but they too are influenced by its past.
Nach meiner Armeezeit haben wir hier dann den ersten Indianerverein gegründet.
Directors Jason Cole and Nora Mandre are interested in showing the GDR in a new light. Their film In the Making explores how some East Germans drawn to the American mythology of cowboys and Indians dressed up as them.
It was a way for them to escape, but they were still followed by the secret police, the Stasi, and they were still hoping to one day leave Eastern Germany.
Wenn ich nicht dahin kann, dann muss ich mir mein Indianerdorf eben hier bauen.
There is an element of fun, of color to it, of people, you know, responding and rebelling and creating their own fun within this society. So it's not just people who are crushed by, you know, the Stasi and things like that.
What today's generation of Berlin filmmakers appreciate is that the city has provided them with an environment where they can develop their ideas. That's the view at Film Arche, a self-organized film school in Berlin.
When the wall came down, this was the perfect playground for artists with little money that wanted to experience freedom, and that's why I think Berlin still lives off that a little bit, although it's changing because it's becoming just more hip and more expensive.
And the city becoming more expensive is a major topic among young filmmakers as Berlin neighborhoods become more gentrified. Directors are even making films about it.
Gentrification is definitely a theme in the films because I've moved here 5 years ago and the prices, it's crazy in 5 years how that has changed, and it has therefore effect in everything of like, okay, how much money do I have left to make a film if I have to pay more rent, stuff like that, of course.
Another issue Berlin filmmakers are exploring is one with topicality, how the city should handle asylum seekers.
There has been a very complex history of immigration to Germany after the Second World War. This has echoed in the documentaries that have been made in Germany over this past year.
As Berlin filmmakers go about their lives, Germany's divided past isn't always on their minds. There are clearly new concerns. But 25 years on, the wall and what it represents is still, at the very least, informing their worldview and the stories they want to tell. Well, that brings us to the end of our special Berlin edition of Talking Movies. We hope you've enjoyed the programme. Please remember you can always reach us online at our website at bbc.com/Talking Movies, and you can find us on Facebook too. So from me, Tom Brooke, and the rest of the Talking Movies production team here in Berlin, it's goodbye as we leave you with some of the sights and sounds of the city.
Thank you.